Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel, MR.Creepy. So today's video is definitely gonna creep you out. In this video, we're getting into 5 true stories from deep inside the Idaho wilderness. Places where the trails run out, the cell signal dies, and you are completely on your own. Before we begin, let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is for you right now. If you enjoy this kind of content, make sure to like the video and subscribe. Alright, let's get into tonight's stories. I've fished the middle fork of the Salmon River for going on 11 years. It's not a casual destination. From Stanley, you drive 2 hours of washboard dirt just to reach the put-in at Bear Valley. The Frank Church Wilderness surrounds the entire drainage, no roads in, no roads out except the one you came down. I'd done the float section twice with guided parties and once with 2 friends from college. But that September, I wanted to go in alone. 4 days, a fly rod, a permit I'd applied for the previous February, and a stretch of river I'd been thinking about since April. My wife thought I was being stubborn about it. She wasn't wrong, but I knew the watershed well enough to be careful. I left a full float plan with the Challis Ranger District office, and I drove up on a Thursday to get ahead of any weekend hikers. The trailhead at Bear Valley was empty when I arrived. Late September is shoulder season on the Middle Fork. Most permitted parties finish before the 3rd week. I loaded my frame pack, locked the truck, and walked back to the cab for a water filter I'd left on the seat. That was when I found the map. It was tucked under my driver's side wiper blade, folded into quarters, drawn on the inside of a torn paper grocery bag with what looked like a felt tip marker. No name, no words, no date. Just a rough outline of the river corridor with 2 marks on it, an X about 4 miles downstream, and a second symbol near it that looked like a rectangular structure with lines coming off one end. The drawing was careful. Whoever made it had taken time with it. I stood in the empty parking area and looked at the empty road and the empty tree line in every direction. My truck was the only vehicle. I told myself it was probably a note from a party that had just hiked out, marking a good campsite, or a productive run of water. People leave notes for each other in wilderness trailheads. It happens. I folded it, put it in my chest pocket, and started down the bank. The river was low and transparent, the way it gets in fall, and I worked upstream pockets slowly and covered water I hadn't fished before. I saw fresh elk sign in the mud near a gravel bar, a young black bear pulling serviceberry off the shrubs on the east bank, and a merganser working the same seam I was. I ate lunch, sitting on a bleached cottonwood log, and thought about almost nothing. It was the kind of quiet you spend the whole rest of the year earning. I reached my planned campsite at the Marble Creek confluence around 4 in the afternoon. The tent was already there, a green 2-man dome, properly staked with the rainfly pulled tight and the guy lines adjusted. No pack outside it, no food bag visible, no fire ring touched, no boots at the entrance. Just the tent, set up in the exact spot I'd marked on my topo map as the best flat ground in that mile of river. I called out twice, loud enough to carry. Nothing. I walked the surrounding ground for 20 minutes and found 1 set of boot prints in the soft silt near the water's edge, heading downstream. The edges were clean enough that the river hadn't softened them yet. Recent. I set up my own camp 30 yards upstream on a secondary flat and cooked quickly and told myself whoever it was had gone for an evening walk and would be back before dark. No one came back. I slept poorly. The river covered most ambient sound, which I usually find easy to rest inside, but that night it felt like a wall that kept me from hearing anything on the other side of it. I woke twice and shined my headlamp toward the green dome and saw it sitting there unchanged. By morning I had half convinced myself the person had returned late while I was asleep, and I just hadn't heard them. I broke camp without going over to check and moved downstream to cover the water I'd planned. The next 2 days were good fishing. Cutthroat and bull trout on elk hair caddies in clear low water. I moved miles and didn't look back at Marble Creek. I mostly stopped thinking about the tent. On the 4th morning, I packed out. My truck sat where I'd left it. I walked around it the way I always do, checking tires. Everything looked right until I got to the driver's door and saw that the side mirror had been folded in, not bumped. Folded deliberately, the way you do when you're squeezing through a narrow space or adjusting it by hand from outside the vehicle. I hadn't touched it since I'd parked. I sat in the cab with the engine off for a few minutes. Then I drove to Stanley and used the payphone outside the outfitter to call the Chalice Field office. I described the tent, the location, the boot prints. The ranger I spoke with asked if I had seen anyone. I said no. She asked for the coordinates and wrote them down and said they would send someone to check. 2 weeks after I got home, I found a brief item in the Lemhi County online news. A man had been reported overdue from a solo float on the Middle Fork. Remains had been recovered from a deep pool near the Marble Creek confluence, consistent with drowning. The item said he had been traveling alone and had not filed a float plan. I still have the handwritten map. I've taken it out and looked at it more times than I can count. The X sits directly over that pool. I've never determined what the second mark was meant to show. I've stopped trying to work it out. I haven't gone into that watershed alone since. My wife Rachel and I had been trying to fix something for about a year before that trip. Not in a dramatic way, more in the way where you start eating dinner in front of the television instead of at the table, and then one day you notice you haven't really talked in 3 weeks. We weren't fighting. We were disappearing from each other in small daily increments, and I think we both understood that the Idaho backcountry was a place where you couldn't disappear. No phone, no work email, no separate rooms to retreat to, just the two of you and whatever was still there between you. We picked the Sawtooth Wilderness in August, a 4-day loop out of the Iron Creek trailhead up to Alpine Lake, across to Sawtooth Lake, and back around through the Cirque Basin. Rachel had done backcountry trips in Colorado, but never Idaho. I'd done the Sawtooths twice before, once in college, and once with my brother. I knew the elevation, and the afternoon lightning, and the way the scree fields above the lakes could fool you into thinking the pass was closer than it was. The first day and a half went the way I'd hoped. We talked more on that trail than we had in months. Something about moving your body through difficult terrain with another person resets a conversation. You stop performing and start talking. We reached Alpine Lake on the second afternoon and cooked a good meal on a flat granite shelf above the water and watched the light go out of the sky in about 15 colors. Rachel said it was the first time she'd felt present in a long time. I knew exactly what she meant. We met the man on the morning of day 3. He was coming down the trail toward us while we were heading up toward the pass. Tall, probably mid-50s, with a frameless pack that looked too small for a multi-day trip and boots that hadn't been broken in properly. The back heel worn strangely, the tongue shifted. He stopped when he reached us and said he was turned around and had been walking since before dawn. He gave his name as Gary. He said he'd come in from a different trailhead and taken a wrong bearing off the lake basin. None of that was unusual. People get turned around in the Sawtooths regularly. The trail junctions aren't always signed, and the terrain above treeline looks similar from multiple angles. I showed him our topo map. He leaned over it and pointed to where he thought he'd gone wrong. His finger landed in a basin about 2 miles from where he said his car was parked. I walked him through the route back to the correct drainage, showed him the saddle he needed to aim for, and told him to keep the tallest peak on his left until he hit the maintained trail. He thanked us, and we moved in opposite directions. Rachel said he seemed rattled. I agreed and didn't think much more about it. We crested the pass and dropped into the Sawtooth Lake Basin by noon. It's one of the most exposed camps in the whole circuit. Big open water, granite everywhere, no tree cover to speak of. We found a site on the northeast shore and set up. While Rachel filtered water, I walked the shoreline to stretch my legs. There was a small object on a flat rock about 60 yards from our tent. A carved wooden figure, rough but deliberate, about 4 inches tall, human shape. A crosshatch pattern worked into the chest with what looked like a knife point. It was sitting upright, with its face pointed directly toward our site. I picked it up and turned it over. The base had 2 letters carved into it with the same blade. R and M, Rachel and Marcus, our initials. I stood with it in my hand for long enough that Rachel came to find me. I showed it to her without saying anything. Her face went through 3 different expressions before she spoke. She said Gary hadn't known our names. I confirmed he hadn't. She asked if I'd introduced us. I hadn't. We'd talked for 10 minutes over a map, and I had never once said either of our names. We broke camp in under 20 minutes. We didn't discuss it. We just moved. The plan had been to finish the loop on day 4. Instead, we took the most direct trail out of the basin and pushed hard toward Iron Creek without stopping for a proper lunch. We covered about 9 miles in just over 4 hours. Rachel didn't speak much, and I didn't try to fill the silence. When we came out of the tree line at the parking area, there was a single other vehicle besides ours, a gray pickup with a bent antenna and a topo sticker on the rear window. I recognized the color of the frameless pack sitting in the truck bed. We got in our car and drove to Stanley and sat in the parking lot of the only diner in town without going inside for about 10 minutes. I reported it to the Custer County Sheriff's Office the following day when we got back to Boise. I described the man, described the figure, gave them the location. The deputy asked if I felt we'd been physically threatened. I said not directly. He wrote everything down and told me they would look into it. We never heard back. Rachel and I did fix things eventually, but she has not been into a backcountry wilderness since that trip. She doesn't talk about why. She doesn't need to. I still have the carved figure in a drawer in my desk. I've never been able to throw it away, and I've never been able to explain why I kept it. Both things feel like the same problem. Derek and I had been friends since the 7th grade in Lewiston. That's the kind of friendship that doesn't need maintenance. You can go 8 months without a real conversation and pick it up exactly where you left it. He was an electrician. I was teaching high school history. Neither of us had any business being in the Gospel Hump Wilderness, which is probably why we both wanted to go. The Gospel Hump sits in the Nez Perce National Forest in central Idaho. It's one of the least visited wilderness areas in the lower 48 states, which sounds like a selling point until you're standing in it and you realize that designation exists because the terrain earns it. No maintained trails through most of the interior, deadfall across every drainage, elevation changes that don't announce themselves. We'd been planning the trip for 2 years, adding gear and subtracting excuses until there was nothing left to do but go. We drove up from Lewiston in Derek's truck on a Friday evening in early July and camped the first night at the Slate Creek trailhead. No one else was there. We cooked on a small gas stove, drank 2 beers each, and went to sleep early. It felt like the beginning of something good. The first full day into the interior was hard in a way that felt honest. Boulder fields and creek crossings and navigation off topo map rather than trail markers. Derek was better at the map work than I was. He had a spatial sense I've always lacked. He could hold terrain in his head as a 3-dimensional shape rather than a flat drawing, and he moved through the landscape accordingly. By afternoon, we were deeper in than either of us had been on any previous trip. The small thing happened at the end of that first full day. We were looking for a campsite near a drainage marked on the map when Derek stopped and pointed at the slope above us. A section of deadfall had been moved, not blown over by wind, arranged. 4 large spruce trunks stacked parallel to each other at the edge of a flat bench above the creek, the root ends pointing the same direction. The exposed soil underneath was pale and dry, meaning the logs had been there long enough to kill the vegetation, but not long enough to grow new material back. Derek said it looked like someone had been building something and stopped. I agreed, and we didn't talk about it again. We found a flat near the water and made camp. The second day we climbed toward the ridge and had long views across multiple drainages. We saw no smoke, no structures, no movement, just the kind of country that makes you understand why Lewis and Clark spent 3 weeks trying to cross it and nearly starved. We ate well and slept well, and I started to relax in the way I'd been hoping for since April. It was on the morning of day 3 that Derek found the box. He had walked 50 yards from camp to relieve himself and called my name in a tone I hadn't heard from him before. I found him crouching next to a shallow depression at the base of a lichen-covered boulder. Inside the depression, wrapped in a section of oilcloth and pushed back against the rock face, was a metal ammunition box of the kind you find at surplus stores. The hasp was rusted, but the seal was intact. Derek looked at me, and I looked at him, and I said we should leave it where it was. He opened it anyway. Inside, a laminated sheet of paper with handwritten grid coordinates in 2 columns, 40 or 50 entries, a small roll of nylon cord, a hunting license issued to a name I won't print here from Lemhi County, dated 3 years prior, and a photograph, printed on regular paper, laminated the same way as the coordinate sheet. It showed a section of hillside with 2 rock cairns flanking what looked like a trail junction. The image was clear enough to see. The cairns were recent. No lichen on the stones, soil still visible between the base rocks. Derek went quiet in the way he gets when he's working something out. I was already closing the oilcloth. I told him to put it back. I told him we had no idea what those coordinates marked, and I did not want to find out. I told him the right move was to note our location on the GPS, seal the box back up, and contact the Forest Service when we got out. He agreed, slowly, and we repacked the box and set it back in the depression. We broke camp and moved. For the next 4 hours we made good miles toward the northern trailhead where Derek's brother was picking us up on day 5. The terrain was better than it had been. More open, easier footing. I was beginning to think we had made the right call and that I had catastrophized a hunter's cached gear into something it wasn't. Then Derek stopped on a ridge and pointed down into the drainage below us. A man was walking in the same direction we were traveling, on a parallel line about 300 yards to our east. No pack, moving fast. He didn't look up. He didn't slow down. He just moved through the timber at a pace that covered ground steadily, without any of the hesitation that rough terrain demands. He crossed a rocky section that had taken us 20 minutes to navigate and went through it in under 5. We watched without speaking for about 2 minutes and then moved off the ridgeline so we weren't silhouetted against the sky. Derek said what I was thinking. Whoever it was had not come from below. We would have crossed their tracks at the creek. They had come from above the ridge, which meant they'd been higher than us and moved down. We had been the highest people in that drainage all morning. We altered our bearing and pushed northeast, adding roughly 2 miles to reach a different drainage entirely. We didn't stop to filter water at the next creek. We drank from a seep and kept moving. I watched the tree line the way you watch a dog you don't know. We reached the northern trailhead at 4 in the afternoon on day 4, a full day ahead of schedule. Derek's brother was not there yet. We sat on the tailgate of a truck belonging to someone we didn't know and waited, without explaining ourselves to each other. On the drive back to Lewiston, I told Derek we needed to report the box. He said he'd already taken a photo of the coordinate sheet before he sealed it up. I told him that was the wrong decision. He said he knew. We filed the report with the Salmon River Field Office 2 days later. I gave them the GPS coordinates for the box. An officer called me back once to confirm the location and told me they would investigate. That was the lost contact. I looked up the name on the hunting license 3 months later. I found an obituary from a county paper in Lemhi. The man had died in an unrelated accident, a truck rollover on a forest road, about 14 months before we found the box. I have not been able to determine what the coordinates marked. Derek says he's tried cross-referencing them against known geography and gets nothing consistent. We've agreed not to dig further. What I carry from that trip is not the man moving through the trees or the photograph or even the coordinates. It is the moment I said, "Leave it," and Derek opened it anyway, and I let him. That was the decision that put us in proximity to something we had no business being near. I could have walked away. I stood there and watched and said nothing useful. Some failures aren't dramatic. They're just a pause where a better person would have moved. I took the job at the engineering firm in Boise because the work was stable and the people seemed reasonable. After 8 years at a company where I'd watched 3 rounds of layoffs from the inside, reasonable felt like enough. By the second year, I had a desk I liked, a lunch group, and a manager named Paul who organized an annual fall hike for anyone in the office who wanted to come. He called it a team reset. Most people called it the one weekend a year they felt like humans again. That October, 6 of us drove north to the Selkirk Mountains in the Idaho Panhandle, just outside the Kenixu National Forest boundary near Priest Lake. Paul had done the route before, a 12-mile out and back along a ridge trail that gave long views of the lake below, and came back through old-growth cedar that blocked the wind and smelled like something a candle company would spend years trying to replicate. The plan was simple. One night, one camp, no agenda beyond the miles. The 6th person in the group was a man named Terrence, who had transferred to our Boise office from the Portland branch 3 months earlier. He was quiet, in a way that read as thoughtful rather than antisocial. He asked good questions in meetings, brought his own pour-over coffee setup to the office, and remembered the names of your family members after you mentioned them once. The kind of person you feel good about knowing. The trail climbed steadily for the first 4 miles through mixed timber before opening onto the ridge. Everyone spread out naturally according to pace. Paul and 2 others up front, me and our office manager Karen in the middle, Terrence just behind. He walked without trekking poles and moved easily on the rocky sections. At the first viewpoint, he stopped next to me and named the drainage below us without checking a map or his phone. I said I didn't know he'd been to this area before. He said he hadn't. I assumed he'd studied the topo. Some people do that. I filed it and moved on. We camped in a flat between 2 large cedars about a mile from the ridge crest. Paul had picked the site from a description in a trip report online. It was a good site, flat ground, a reliable spring nearby, a fire ring made from existing rocks that we cleared of old ash and used for the evening. We ate well and talked about things that had nothing to do with work, and the conversation came easily, the way it does when you remove people from the context where you usually know them. Sometime after 10 o'clock, Karen mentioned that the spring water had a slight metallic taste. Paul said that was normal for this geology. The Selkirks have high mineral content in the groundwater. Karen accepted that, and we moved on. Terrence said nothing, but I watched him set his own water bottle aside and drink from a second container he hadn't used all day. I noticed it because the second container was full. He had not used it on the trail, meaning he had carried it full over 12 miles of elevation change without once reaching for it. I didn't say anything. I went to my tent and lay on my pad and listened to the fire settle and told myself it meant nothing. The second thing happened at 2 in the morning. I woke needing water and reached for my bottle and found it empty. I unzipped and walked to the spring with my headlamp. The beam caught Terrence crouching at the spring's edge with what looked like a small glass vial. He was not filling a bottle. He was holding the vial just below the surface where the water emerged from the rock. When my headlamp hit him, he stood up and turned, and his expression was completely neutral. Not startled, not embarrassed. Neutral, the way a person looks when they have already prepared what they are going to say. He told me he collected water samples from different elevations. He said he had done it since college. He held the vial up, and the water inside was clear. He smiled and went back to his tent. I stood at that spring for a long time. I ran through explanations the way you do when you are trying to give someone the benefit you are not sure they have earned. Water hobbyist, geology interest. The vial could have been anything. I had no evidence of harm. I had no concrete wrongness I could point at. We hiked out the next morning in good weather. Terrence walked at the back of the group the whole way down and did not initiate conversation. When we reached the cars, he shook hands with Paul and said it had been a good trip. He drove north on Highway 57 while the rest of us turned south towards Sandpoint. I told Paul what I'd seen when we stopped for gas. He listened carefully and said he didn't know what to make of it. He said maybe Terrence was just eccentric. I said maybe. Terrence gave notice 4 weeks later and transferred to a branch in the Pacific Northwest. HR sent a standard goodbye email. Nobody asked questions. I still think about the full water bottle. Carried 12 miles, never opened. I think about it every time I share a meal with someone I don't know well enough, which is now almost everyone. I have not been back to that ridge. I'm not sure the ridge is the problem. I think the problem came back to Boise in the same car I did, and I haven't figured out how to leave it somewhere. My daughter Lily turned 17 in March and told me she wanted to do an overnight trip before the end of summer. Just the two of us. No group, no guided itinerary, no structured program. She had been on day hikes with me since she was old enough to carry her own water, but she wanted to sleep in the backcountry and cook over a fire and navigate with a physical map. I was proud enough of that request that I didn't ask twice. I started planning the same week. I chose the Selway Bitterroot Wilderness in the far northern stretch of the Clearwater National Forest. I'd scouted a route along a tributary of the Selway River the previous spring during a solo day hike, a 5-mile walk into a wide gravel bar where the river bent south and a secondary creek joined it from the east. Flat ground, clean water, good firewood, low bear traffic compared to the southern drainages, far enough in to feel remote, close enough to the trailhead that I could push us out in under 2 hours if something went wrong. Nothing was supposed to go wrong. We drove up from Boise on a Saturday morning in late August and reached the trailhead before noon. The lot had 3 other vehicles in it, reassuring without being crowded. Lily adjusted her pack straps with the practiced efficiency of someone who had been watching me do it for years, and then did it better. We signed the trailhead register, noted our planned site and return date, and walked in. The first 3 miles were easy under good timber cover. Lily asked questions the whole way, about tree species, about how to read water depth from the surface color, about what the scrape marks on a ponderosa meant, and how old they were. She absorbed information the way she always had, quickly and without asking the same question twice. We reached the gravel bar by 2 in the afternoon and found it empty. We set up camp, filtered water, and I let her build the fire from scratch without coaching. She got it on the 3rd try and didn't ask for help. We ate freeze-dried chili and played cards until the light was gone and talked about her college plans and whether she thought I'd been too strict when she was younger. She said yes, specifically about the phone rules. I said I'd probably do it the same way again. She laughed and that was enough. The woman appeared at the tree line across the creek just after 9 o'clock. She was standing at the far bank in a fleece jacket and hiking pants with no pack visible. She looked to be in her 60s, calm posture, hands at her sides. She called across the water and asked if we had a few minutes. Her voice carried easily over the creek noise. I said yes, and she waded across at the shallow section, barefoot, boots in one hand, and introduced herself as Ruth. She said she was camped upstream and had seen our fire and wanted to make sure we knew about the trail washout on the North Junction because she'd gotten turned around on it earlier and didn't want us to make the same mistake tomorrow. That was reasonable. Washouts happen in late summer on creek trails. I thanked her and asked where the damage was. She gave a specific description, a section of cut bank about a mile above our planned exit, easily bypassed by dropping to the gravel and walking the riverbed for 40 yards. She described the bypass clearly. I asked how she knew which way we were heading tomorrow. She said she had seen us sign the register at the trailhead. We talked for perhaps another 10 minutes. She was easy to speak with, knowledgeable about the watershed. Mentioned she had been coming here for 20 years. She asked if Lily was my daughter, and when I said yes, she looked at her for a moment in a way I couldn't fully read, not unfriendly, evaluating. Before she left, she said something that I have turned over many times since. She said, and I am being precise here, that Lily reminded her of a girl who used to hike this drainage with her father. She said they had come every summer until they didn't anymore. She said it in the same mild tone she had used to describe the washout. Then she wished us a good night, waded back across the creek, and walked into the trees without a headlamp. Lily watched the tree line for a while after Ruth left. She asked me what Ruth meant by that last part. I said I didn't know. Lily said it didn't sound like a nice thing when you thought about it. I told her not to overthink it. I was the one who overthought it. At first light, I walked upstream to find Ruth's camp. Half a mile up, on a sandy bench above the high water mark, I found a fire ring with ash that had been cold for more than one day. No tent footprint in the sand, no food hang, no boot prints going in or out that were fresher than the ash. I stood at that bench for a while. The creek moved past, and the trees held the early light, and somewhere above the ridge a woodpecker whooped a dead snag in a steady, unhurried rhythm. I walked back to camp and packed without telling Lily what I'd found. She asked about it once on the drive home. She said Ruth's camp had seemed too quiet when she walked past the spot this morning to wash her face. She said she hadn't seen any gear. I told her some people pack very light. Lily looked out the passenger window at the timber sliding past and said she understood. She has not asked to go back since. She says she still wants to do more backcountry trips, just not there. When I ask her why, she shakes her head slightly and changes the subject. I have not told her what I found at that fire ring. She was 17, and it was supposed to be the trip that made her love the wilderness the way I do. I think it did the opposite. I think something about that woman in the dark beside the creek made my daughter understand that remote places carry the history of everyone who has ever moved through them, and not all of that history wants to stay in the past. That understanding came at a cost I didn't mean to charge her. She is in her first year of college now and doing well, but she sleeps with the hall light on, and she has never once mentioned that trip with any kind of warmth. Some things you cannot unhike. That wraps up all 5 stories for tonight. If this one got under your skin, leave a comment. I genuinely read every single one. Hit like if you made it this far, and subscribe so you never miss the next upload. Stay aware out there. Mr. Rostin, creepy and out.